All right, so yeah, we'll do a Q&A in just a moment, and I'd also love to hear Randy speak in a moment as well on quantum physics and base theory. But before that, I just wanted Mark to maybe show us a little bit what you're working on here.
Oh, hi. There's a big screen here. I need one of these. What this is an aspect of base that deals with orientation in terms of establishing fractal lines. It's using the base of your personality as well as your design, both for the sun, earth, and the nodes. Two of the nodes are called link nodes, which is the design north node and the personality south node. These are actually agents of the monopole, and they work with base, and they actually establish the connection in the illusion of our separateness is through these link nodes in the magnetic monopole. So this is what holds us together in our juxtaposition and gives us our orientation in our fractal. Now, like with Jonah here, he has that second base up in here, right? So that's the primary way he's gonna filter from his foundation to build his perspective. But his focus on the personality side is going to be here, even though that's part of his base. Because what happens is his link node, the third base, comes over to this side, along with his personality node, and his fifth base that is already there, and that orients it to what's called a focused personality orientation, which means the 5 is going to be his primary focus of his activities.
Yeah, right, because the 2 are kind of triangulating towards the 1 point.
Yeah.
It's focusing on the 1 point. So base 2 and base 3 are triangulating. And for those who want to know how Mark arrived at that, that's because you're taking the design north node, which is base 3, over to the personality side. Mm-hmm. You're taking the personality sun earth, which is base 2, and then you're taking the personality north node, which is 5. And so really those 3 bases, base 2, 3, and 5, are what we could call active or highlighted, or the bases that are being called out on the personality side. And really base 1 and 4 are bases that I don't have represented on the personality side. I have access to them through base 5, and also base 3 has access to base 1, base 2 has access to base 4, but those are actually dispreferred, that base 2 and 4 don't have much connection, and base 3 and 1 don't have much either, even though they are connected. There's not a strong affinity. And actually base 1 has a strong affinity with base 4, and base 3 and 2 have affinities. So really, the primary way I reach those bases are through base 5. But what this also shows us is that there will be some base maps where people just cannot access certain bases. It's like certain people, you're just like, I just don't get them. I have no way of getting them. Mm-hmm. And theoretically, there's nobody in the whole planet that I have that with. I mean, I should be able to get everyone or have some sort of universal ability to connect with people because of this.
And because you do have on both, see, this represents our personality, which can impact in person or over a distance out of aura, or indirectly through our works, through our recordings or books or writings. This is where, if you really resonate with somebody and you pick up a book and or you learn a course and you hear them or you read them and you're like, yes, this really resonates. It's probably on a base level on a fractal, because this influences indirectly, directly, out of person, in person. This represents the physical establishing of the Maya. So this is where you really connect in person physically. You also connect in person on this conscious level, but this is mostly just in person, and this is the physical fractal of influences, the primary fractal, and they're both impersonal in nature. This is just information being able to be passed down from one to the other to the next. So this explains it that way, and these are the attributes of it. And if you notice, I rotated because in Ra's materials, a lot of this, the one is here, it just rotated once. So I just rotated it this way so it can match up. If you notice, the 5 on this side is fully colored in because it's in the middle. The 2 is only in the top right. That's where that is. The 1 is over here, like here. But the 5 that was on this side, that goes this side, is only on this corner. And that's because it goes to this side, to the physical side. And that's why that gate is here. And it helps link the physical and the personality together.
Yeah, these are such helpful graphics. Mark first made one for me sometime back. I guess maybe your first or second trip here after, I think in March or something. But so helpful, and it really was the first time that I was able to see it all laid out like that. I mean, when I first learned this material, I took a bunch of notes, and I wasn't able to really get much out of it other than the sort of key takeaway of, okay, some people have more of a universal appeal, some people have more of a limited appeal, some people are more connected to certain bases than others. That was about as far as I got with it, just kind of like, okay, that makes sense. You know, we have different ways of connecting. But this is now so much more powerful to be able to see it laid out like this in such a visual way. And also to realize, and I hadn't really made that connection before, I mean, I knew that I had the third base in my design nodes, but I didn't really think about how that does also give me the ability to connect with people physically, so that it's kind of like people connect with me from YouTube or different things where they've known me, and then they meet me in person and go, I wasn't really sure what you'd be like, but wow, I really connect with you in person too. And it's really nice. I have that third base that kind of allows me to have a sort of universal key
you can
to connect with people there.
When you're in the middle like this, you can, connect to different sides, but his primary focus will be here and here, which is basically the crux of life itself, holding everything together in this illusion. So that's why you deal with the things that you deal with a lot.
It makes a lot of sense to me, and also how little base 4 is represented here, because I don't necessarily have the easiest time with base 4, and also, Ra was base 4, and I probably could have met him while he was alive, because I did learn about human design many years before he passed, but I didn't meet him, and he's base 4, and I'm going to probably have more. But I also do have base 4 people in my life, Dave Myers, people that I do really strongly connect with. So
I'm a 5-4 binary on both sides, so I'm
right.
very,
well, and I have so many base 5 people in my life I connect with, who all, of course, have base 4 designs, because that is the personality base is always going to be one greater,
or one greater.
Yeah, the personality is, and the design is one less. Exactly.
And I just wanted to point out, because Michael is part of this. Let's see if you can see it on here better. No, you can't get it bigger than that.
Well, what about if we go into share mode or slide mode? I don't know.
I don't know. But anyway, if you can see that, actually just visually from the circles, this is Jonah and that's Michael, and they have some similar things of their path, if you could see. 135s on the design side, 153, 352. So there's a lot of commonality.
So we're the same,
there.
except that I have his, or no, he's a 1 and I'm a 2. And so other than that, we have the same 5
You have a lot of the.
And then we have the same 135 on the design side. So that's
there's just, this swaps out for each other. Otherwise, it's very similar. So that's why you have such a good bond and connection.
I never realized that. That really our only difference is he's the base 2 version, I'm the base 1 version. That's the one difference.
But your focuses are both still in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why you guys, have. It's interesting to see that come out like that, just from a visual perspective.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And we've been such good friends for over 10 years now. And I can't wait to see these for other attendees of the post-conference retreat here, because that is
I have not everybody, so I got a couple more to make, but most everybody in here has one. So all right, and you all get it. And
can I ask a question?
Sure.
So when it says focus, it's like through the 2 numbers flanking the middle one, through those 2 bases you get to that person gets to the middle one.
Yeah, it's because it's in this there's different configurations which mean different things. There's like a binary when there's only two looking at each other. There's focused when you have three bases on one side. So the thing that's in the middle that's meeting it is going to be the thing that's going to connect. You have to have some kind of connection. Like, let me see here.
To get you to the other two?
Yeah, this is how you learn what. If you have three, there's got to be a focus. There's got to be two looking at one. So there's two that look at each other. So the focus is here. Now you can have one that has all here, and then there's one here, and that's a binary separation. And that's like somebody who has two separate interests that don't connect whatsoever, like two different people. Like one time they're there, another time they're over there. So there's all these different configurations of how you're oriented to deal with life. And this just gives you the focus of where these three come together is right here. These three come together right here. So that's where a lot of his focus is on, is dealing with personality and the objective, you know. And we all have, so everybody, Michael, there's N, who's not here today. There's pockets, you can see.
She's binary on the personality side.
Yeah, binary.
Oh, although there's, it's still focused. Because
still
there's five.
focused.
Sorry, it's my bad. Yeah, if there was no five, that would be binary.
There's a focused,
and there's a binary.
1-5. I don't. Somebody hasn't been a binary separation yet, which I think Rob mentioned something like people who have a binary separation might have an opportunity for a little separation. So here we go. Different focus here.
Yeah, Matthew.
And then there's Richard. Yeah, and you got this. You got a little different flavor here. So you got different things.
Right, that's focused on
but
the one. It's not focused in the middle there. You can see because it's the three. It's the three of the four corners. So you can see that focused doesn't always focus on the middle. That there's.
And the other thing just to remember, and it's important, these are just impersonal lines of influence. So these are just things that no matter what you're part of, they're either people going to resonate or not to you. You know, or the subjects that you're going to resonate with or not, or the places you're going to resonate or not. You know, so that's it. And the rest will be done whenever, soon, shortly.
Yeah. Well, if you want to delegate to a generator, if you want to show me how to do it.
Now that I got it done, it's a lot of, this cut and paste template, but you got to rearrange things and add and edit. But,
he's got his ego. His ego wants to do it.
He has a defined ego. Yeah, he's gonna do it. Get all the credit.
I am base 4 and 5.
We love Mark. Okay, we love Mark. He got our espresso machine. Let's hear it for the espresso machine.
So there's much rejoicing. Here's your chord back.
Thank you.
By base orientation, Richard.
Thank you. Well, let's let me just. I think Brandy, if you'd like to present a little, and then we can, or should we do Q&A first? What do people think? Are we doing?
I could just share in a quick couple of minutes.
Well, but there was one thing I just don't want to forget. So yeah, so just one moment, and you're welcome to comment on it. But it was that. What was your comment? You just had.
Base 4 reminds me of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead.
Right. So I guess maybe just first, really quickly, just opening up to any comments just on the bases, or what base did I do the most disservice to? Probably base 4. But just kind of let me share another one. I definitely want to. Well, okay. How about this? Let's have you do the quantum, but I think we can just do it over there. I think I'd like to move this over there a little bit, only because that way we can use the microphone when people have comments and questions and so on, and it'll be a little bit easier. And then I'll just adjust this as well.
I'm going to look at the base structure so I could have it as unless you're going to have it on the screen.
No, I just took the screen, so.
Okay.
Around there, or maybe Richard just hold it.
Okay.
Yeah, feel free to adjust.
And you don't want us to get too far from the.
Oh, thank you.
When I first learned about bass, and this is just what I was sharing, it brought together for me my my biblical scholarship as well as my scientific scholarship. I have, in my early days, I went through every religion trying to find that feeling, and then I found God in quantum physics and bass theory is really what came of it. And what I, just quickly going through them all, the way that I see it is base 1 is movement. Base 1 is before the wave function is collapsed. Base 1 is just pure energy. Base 2 is collapsing the wave function. It is using our sight to collapse, to have a preference, to collapse the wave function into something, to decide that we will be the thing. The third is then that thing being able to be acclimated into the world. So after we've collapsed the wave function, now we have perspective. Now we have objectivity. Now we can see other wave functions that are collapsed and then come together as whatever that thing is. So now we go into the body. So once the energy is alive, we collapse the wave function. Now we have form, or the illusion of which, and this is 3, this is that objectivity. And now in that illusion of form, we've got 4. That illusion of form needs to separate. It needs to be smell and senses, and it needs to be the illusion of form. This is 4. In the Bible, we could go back and say the breath of God. And then the breath of God is what created creation. And then we ate from the tree of good and evil. We collapsed the wave function. And then we started procreating. We came together as 3. And then the devil came. This is 4. Right?
I like that a lot. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
This is the way that it keeps it a good movie, because if we stayed in 1, 2, and 3, nobody wants to watch people tiptoe through the daisies for 2 hours. That's a boring story. We need the devil. We need the other side. We need the story to be able to create progress and friction and connection and intimacy. And so then the 4th line is that real individuation, right? The pancreas cells can only be pancreas cells, because if they're not, they turn into cancer. So the cells that stay in the pancreas that are not individuated to be pancreas cells then come together, try to all be the same thing, and cause us to die, cause the pancreas to now be cancerous. This is what we're doing as human beings. The individuation process is line 4. What we are doing is 4. We are being divinely selfish. We are colonizing as ourselves. We are being a 4 right now, and we need to be a 4 in order to be the greater body that we are creating. We need to individuate. We need to be pancreas and heart cells and knee cells and joint cells. We need to know what our individuated design is so that we can go to work doing that thing, which is separate than the other things. It's divine selfishness. It's this idea of, together but separate in such a beautiful way. The ocean is so beautiful and the desert is so beautiful, but they do not come together, obviously. They stay apart, and so they thrive.
So except in Los Angeles.
Except in Los Angeles. And, they all affect each other, right? Because the sand gets picked up by the wind and then drops into the ocean. So everything affects itself, but they are individuated. And then in the 5th line, it's seeing what we've done. It is becoming God. It is becoming the creator, because now we go back into quantum physics, because once we have perception that we are the individuated creator, now our word is what creates. Now our perception is what creates the illusion of reality, which collapses the wave function again. Which is what keeps the balance of good and evil, if you want to say. Or, some Buddhist monks who say that they sit and they meditate forever. What they're doing is holding that end of the frequency of balancing the illusion that we live within.
It's almost like we begin and end with oneness, because
Absolutely.
Because the base 1 is the principle of oneness. We don't get to separation until base 2, which is the keynote of base 2, although base 1 is what leads to separation, because through movement separation occurs. And then and it's measuring and comparing and all of this stuff. And then we get to finally to base 5, and we sort of have this reclaimed oneness.
Right.
Through,
and now the algorithm
synthesis.
starts again. It's just the algorithm until every paradox is held true. And then we rise to another algorithm and start it again.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some interesting keynotes there in looking at perspective and how that comes into it. I mean, we looked at those keynotes yesterday as well.
Perspective is the choice, right? Perspective is what collapses the wave function. We understand this.
Well, perspective, I mean...
The frequency of the observer is what creates the matter.
Yeah, but I don't know that I would put that. I mean, I think yesterday's keynotes are actually maybe a little bit more useful.
He's still stuck on the devil part.
I did. So, but I just didn't see it bring in yesterday's keynotes. So,
I love hearing you talk about this. It really
Yeah.
feels like bass through 6347.
Oh,
6447.
6447.
thanks.
These are my North notes. I'm walking into them.
Yeah. So, really, everything for base 1 is about individuality and the law of two things cannot be in the same place.
Yes, it has to be a.
separateness. Yeah.
It has to be a wave or a particle.
let's-
it can't be
let's-
both.
Anyone wants to come on in
Separateness
this
to
the view if you
Yeah,
want, or maybe
it's-
okay.
It's a separate
There are lots of
entity to
lots of
yourself.
off-screen talking if people want to be in, and I'd like to get you, Matthew, too, as well, or anybody who wants to.
I mean, I have things to say about bass.
Wait, okay. I definitely want to hear what you have to say about bass. Maybe we can just hold this here.
The bass.
I definitely want to hear what you have to say about bass. So,
I like that song.
yeah, anything, and then we can go on for more of them. So, what did you think of Randy's way of explaining?
Well, I love it, and I love so I have the channel of awareness, which to me, the way that I see bass is so purely mathematical. Like there's no story, and I love how yours has a story because you connected it to the story, you connected it to the vibe, you connected it to the story, which is very, very cool. And so it's like what I'm going to say, I don't want it to sound like it disagrees with, that's I guess what I'm, trying to say. But yeah, I really see it, I try to see bass as just like something that's so purely physical, or like based in quantum physics, based in just as far from the personal human realm as we can get, where you have movement. And like the juxtaposition feels so important to me to mention in every piece, where the 1 is juxtaposed to the 2 together and in contrast, and where the 3 is juxtaposed to the 4, and where the 1 and the 2 are juxtaposed to the 3 and the 4. But really also that the 3 and the 4 are like these layers built on top of the 1 and the 2 in my mind. Like you have the 1 and the 2, you have movement, and in that movement you have the potential for the movement to be observed. You have the potential for there to be a collection of memory about the movement, because it's with the movement, but it's not the movement. So it's the potential for
It's
the
the
movement
residue
to
of
be
the
seen.
movement. It's
Yeah.
what the movement has left behind. or
Exactly.
something. I love that.
And then you have 1 is individuality, no two objects occupying the same space at the same time. So 3 is that individuality coalesced into being. You have now you have not just the potential for the individuality, you have the individuality, you have the individual, you have cells creating, or particles creating celestial bodies. We're celestial bodies. We're just little small celestial bodies that look weird. And then within that, I like the word ego for the 4th bass, but as a 1-3, I actually want to correct it. I actually think world is a better word, because relative to the individual matter, you have the world. And out of that comes the ability to look at the world and think that, well, we measure the world through ourselves. Our individual bodies are what takes the measurements of the world. We take the measurements through our openness. We look at that. And then the ego is really what happens when we become confused that the outside, we become confused thinking the outside world is us. And then we try to change the outside world or change ourselves to be that, or we get, that's the design component of world, of ego. And personality arises out of all this, like the whole illusion where we're watching the movie, but I kind of don't even talk about that or think about that when I'm thinking about bass, because it feels like the 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4 are just so purely fundamental to the form, and the 5 is more fundamental to the observation experience that we have as passenger consciousness of the form. Obviously, it's all illusion, but
Five
yeah,
is like the Akashic record or the collective unconscious.
yeah, yeah.
The Akashic record or the collective unconscious. See, I think the Akashic record would be base 2, the ontological memory that just accumulates. The collective unconscious, good question of where that would really fit in as a concept. I mean, depends how we think about it. I mean, it's also kind of a base 2 thing because it's the memory. But if we want to, I love all of that, Matthew. That's
What
really
type
good.
would you
Okay,
think?
anyone who wants to talk has to come into the screen.
What
and
type
or
would be base 5?
let's come on over and ask the question then. So, here's the thing: I've watched these videos back. I don't think anybody else here does, but nobody can hear you when you say that, and it's just like random voices off screen, and the people on camera going, "Oh, okay." So, okay. So, what was your question?
What type corresponds to base 5? So
What
it's
type?
a reflector?
No.
No?
I mean, first of all, the type relations, there's no direct correspondence. Mike likes
Yeah.
to make the correspondence, but no, I mean, it'd probably be the manifesting generator, right? The 5th type, that's not really a type. No, I mean, I don't make a connection to that. There are diagrams for the other 4 bases, and those diagrams do have some relationship to type. Double yang being manifestor, double yin being generator, and stuff like that. So there are some correlations, but I don't think there's an answer to that. I mean, there's no diagrams for base 5. So as far as the keynoting,
That's interesting.
yeah, because there's only yin or yang, so it's yang yang, yang yin, yin yin, yin yang. There's no, other one. But yeah, so I was going to say though about base 1 being where perspective is. And so base 1 being visual, base 2 is actually not a visual field. It's actually about taste and about taking things in and just how different those are. But again, these are the keynotes of the microcosm. And so that is, so I think what you are saying, Matthew, is that when you're approaching base, you can approach it purely as physics. You can approach it purely as the macrocosm, as a scientist would, and that's so different than at the microcosm. I mean, it's interesting that everything is such a binary that there's a subjective experience of each base,
Right.
which is so different from at the macrocosmic level. And we could even say that there are 3 levels. There's the personal level, there's the social level, which is kind of what I went into today of what are the social functions, and then there's even a further level if we try to remove humans from it altogether. And really just look at, we approach it the same way a physicist might approach it. So yeah, it is interesting to look at it from those.
Yeah, when I first went into base, and do you want me to?
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
When I first went into base and everything clicked, I was like, okay, yeah, send me to a physics conference. I'll convince everyone of human design. I'm ready.
I would love that. I myself had a similar idea where I actually sent base theory to a physicist, and I never got an email back. So, me trying to initiate, just putting it out there. But yeah. Well, any other comments? Anything about the?
I just have another brief comment.
Sure. I was gonna move this back and maybe put everybody in there.
Whenever I look at the keynotes, I mean, just through your presentation of the bases, I always look at the first individuality is, and I go to the bottom, the last one, individuality is relation. It always makes the most sense to me with each of the series of keynotes.
That
Individuality is relation, but I did that with all of them, and it always made the most sense to me as far as the meaning of the keynotes.
I see. You're starting with the very first. Well, so, and also when you see individuality is activity, activity is reaction, reaction is limitation, and so on, that first one, individuality, the other 5 are components of individuality. So, I mean, I guess you're just going to the last component.
Yeah.
Because that's where it all ends up.
Right.
That ultimately.
Summarizes all of it, kind of.
Yeah.
But it only makes sense when you read through all the keynotes first, really,
Yeah.
to get to how is individuality relation.
Yeah, and then one of the interesting things we looked at yesterday was just that there are actually that there are these goads where you see activity being the first keynote of base 1, character being the first keynote of base 2. And so activity and character, how do those relate? reaction versus separation. And we kind of went into some of these yesterday, although it was obviously too much material to cover in one session. But you can just see that these are almost fundamental stories, like relation versus spirit. These are just kind of fundamental. How do we relate to others, and do we relate to others in a way that is good for our spirit or not? Perspective versus integration. How do I maintain my unique perspective, but integrate with the community? Limitation versus nature. How do I, what is human nature against the limitations that are put in front of it? And my human nature versus that would be what's the movie where the guy gets stuck in the rock? 127 hours. That's a very limitation versus nature movie. Not nature in the sense of Nature Channel, but human nature. His human nature against the limitations of that nature, or just people pushing against their own limits. Chemistry versus growth, and so on. Objectivity versus decay. And these are really interesting keynotes.
How
and then
they fit into the hero's journeys outlines if they're...
Yeah, I mean, these are kind of fundamental dichotomies and challenges, and it's basically between base 1 and base 2, and then between base 3 and base 4. Now this, of course, is all at the microcosmic level, at the personal level, the subjective level, and that's why Ra calls it the 10 goads of humanity. It's less what we were talking about before of kind of going into the macrocosm. But then, most interestingly, Ra says that you actually have to take activity, character, biology, and humanity in order to create type. In that you actually have to take reaction, separation, chemistry, and growth and synthesize those in order to make fantasy. And that each of the base 5 keynotes is a synthesis of the other 4 keynotes at that level. So kind of an interesting approach to it. So any other comments, questions, anything? I know you just got here saying, but maybe you had comments or questions from yesterday. I don't know. Or Mark's been busy typing away, making everyone his base mats. Yeah, when I look at him, he just gives me a smile, and it's like, okay, leave me alone.
I love the rhythm is timing so much.
Yeah.
Because like what Ashley just said, the last line really feels like it captures strategy and authority so fundamentally. Rhythm is timing.
Yeah, that it's so much about that.
Everything about the personality, about what we're looking at consciously, is about timing. What we're getting pulled to based on what we're looking at when we're looking at it.
And being able to surrender to the proper.
And I love that what Rob says is, and what we kind of went into yesterday, is that actually strategy and authority is going to be in base 1, but that the personality is what has to surrender. And so in a way it's surrendering to the timing. It's the only place we have the freedom. So in the question of where is no choice and where is freedom, no choice is in base 1, freedom is in base 5. Part of no choice is that ultimately it's about reactivity or reaction, getting in touch with reaction, and how the mind is so far from reaction that it needs to go through the body or through the design to get there. But that the personality can really surrender to the rhythm of things and surrender to the timing. And these will be the keynotes of when it's operating correctly, that it's not trying to force a different rhythm. It's not trying to change the rhythm. It's not trying to force the timing. It is, and it's really, I mean, I like these as sort of, you can think of them as keynotes as well, of how can you tell that the base 5 person is really living their design. Well, they're living out their type, and they're also, essentially they have a wealth of subjectivity. I mean, I don't know how fantasy would be a keynote other than people fantasize about them. I noticed that about base 5 people, is that they elicit fantasy from others, because there's always the fantasy, like a 5th line. What is going on inside? What is the depth of subjectivity for this person? What are they thinking
And in
about?
order to move into the next spiral, we have to fantasy. There has to be, it can't be what we've already know.
I see that they help produce the fantasy for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to note something, because Richard's sitting right there, and I thought of it the other day about base 5, not on a personality level, but on the macro level, which was interesting to me, was he was talking about music of the universe, the speaking, the music, that all these astrological, things that are creating our own music sheets and the music of the universe itself. Well, base 5 is that homogenizing music force that's holding this all together
That's
acoustically.
That's a great point, Mark. Mark just, yeah.
And that's something that I could see, you know.
Well, it's a good thing I have a really long auditory memory because I think I can say everything you said. So Mark was just saying that Richard pointed out the music of the spheres, music of the cosmos, universe, and that, right, there is this sort of orchestration of the planetary bodies, and that is actually the homogenizing force in the same way that the fifth line can be the conditioner, and that space can be sort of, you know, homogenizing. But interestingly, also, Ra calls it the most mutative, which was really funny to me because I'm like, why is it homogenizing and mutative? But that it doesn't actually have anything that's keeping it stuck a certain way. It's not fixed in that way.
Well, it's holding the whole illusion together.
And it holds the whole illusion together. Yeah. Yeah, and of course, harmony of the spheres. This goes back to Pythagoras. This goes back to.
And sound is the seventh sense, in the sense, the unofficial, universal sense for.
You could say, yeah. And so Marx says sound is the seventh sense. I mean, what I always liked is that in human design there are six senses, and sound isn't one of them. That feeling is actually sound. So anytime you're hearing music, you're actually experiencing feeling.
Yeah, sound is primordial. Sound is before it all. Sound is the om, the breath. Sound is creation.
I mean, so there's some comments on vibration and so on. Yeah, I don't.
Tone, right? Is it tone go down to sound? That's what tone is.
Tone 5 is feeling, yeah, and so it is the ubiquitous tone of tones.
But even Ross says acoustically, he mentions that there is a reason there's only 6 tones, and one of them is not officially sound.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's some kind of crosstalk here.
That everyone has.
Yeah. So, I mean, ubiquitously, that tone 5 is the ubiquitous tone, just as color 4 is the ubiquitous color, and there's a big difference there. And if we have continuity to the line level, we can see that there is something like a community of colors where color is relates differently than tone does. I mean. Tone 5 sound has a more universal quality than color 4 touch, in the sense that color 4, who do we touch? We touch our companions, so it's more like tribal. It's like friendship. It's line 4 where you don't touch strangers. You don't just walk up to a stranger to touch them. But you can go talk to a stranger. You can transmit sound to a stranger. That's expected. So that tone 5 feeling or sound is more acceptable with strangers. And also electromagnetic frequencies and auras, as Mark points out. We do transmit our aura to strangers. We sit next to a stranger in a cafe.
That's part of that physical fractal that we showed earlier, is establish our physical connection with each other.
Right, we connect physically, is what Mark is saying. Through
non-physically.
Well, the aura is still physical. It's just the invisible physical, right? So
there is a through line, because like Ross said, the fifth line's the most sensitive to like acoustics, and most of the conditioning or conditioner that comes from like that fifth line is usually done acoustically.
Right, you're saying that the fifth line, there is a through line because there is a connection. Like the voice of fifth line personalities is probably, I mean, even in Ra's color profile materials, he said you could create 12 different profiles or 12 different variations of the fifth line personality, right? Because there would be 12 different ways of talking, 12 different ways of transmitting through voice. And so, there's definitely a through line all the way from base up the line, even though there are some interesting differences. But what can transmit to strangers? The voice. How does the fifth line call to others? Through the voice, through communication. What is the fifth base about? It's about communication, and it's about what the personality is here to do, which is to express its outer authority and all of these things. So there's absolutely a deep continuity and through line. So I really like that. I like that a lot. Okay, well, if anyone has any final comments, otherwise maybe we'll take a little break. Oh, please.
Well, it's all about the bass. That's all.
What comments did you have?
Actually, mine's on a more personal level. I can't really speak quantum and all the other things. But actually, I literally started crying during just the talk about bass 5, because I never knew because I am a base 5, and there's so much confusion about a lot of things, you know, of being so individual, or even being a manifester and saying, well, I'm a manifester, I'm supposed to do, you know, like if it was even with strategy and authority, it can be a little confusing because it does feel like such an integration versus, you know, where all this makes sense. The lines, the tones, this, it all makes sense. But when you are kind of like starting to speak like base 5, you have to see the conglomeration. You have to see where everybody's going to come together, and you know, you want the individuality, but sometimes
Right, it's almost like which one is really you. It's almost like having an undefined G, where you're kind of like, yeah, I want to be an individual, but it's also important that we all have this
I feel
communion.
the surrender. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've said to some people, I'm like, yeah, I go, this trip here is for me for surrender. I wear armor, you know? Mm-hmm. And that seems to go against so many other things that, you know, that essentially you're being taught, especially by your type or this or that. You know what I mean?
Well, and it's that each base is going to have a different agenda, for lack of a better term. And so base 2 is going to say, it's all about the spirit. And base 1 is going to say, it's all about being yourself. And base 3 is going to say, it's all about the body and that your body you have to be correct in. And base 4, you know, they're going to have their own, it's about self-empowerment and it's about not letting people trample you and so on. And base 5 is kind of saying, actually, it's about communion.
Yeah.
Actually, it's about communication. Actually, it's about surrendering to communicating together. And that's the only thing we actually are free to do is to actually have communion.
I mean, but sometimes I struggle with, you know, because I feel like I'm always looking at everything from the outside, the orchestra, the okay, well, this happened. Well, this fight happened over here because look what happened over there.
And you track,
over there.
right. I wondered if base 5 people are more in touch with that cosmic orchestra because you track the Mayan astrology and the other transits and kind of just seeing this whole orchestration, big picture of it, and realizing that for you, it's not about one of these things. People try to push you into be a base 2. It's like being projected on, like it's all about the spirit, Krista. You're like, no, it's not about the spirit for me.
Well,
it's about.
I mean, and that's been something that I've struggled with my entire life. Is I was trying to come up with some kind of perspective, and everybody's like, no, you know, they're like, no, and I'm like, well, and then I try to get talked into their perspective.
Mm-hmm. And perspective is a base 1 thing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
I mean, base 5 isn't even here to have a perspective.
Struggle.
Right.
I was like, I don't want to. Half the time, I don't talk to people because you know, quite honestly, it sounds assy, but I don't want to change my mind because, quite honestly, I'm only changing my mind because it's like giving up.
Right, it's the base 5 getting pushed into one of the other bases because it's so ubiquitous and people see, hey, base 5 could be base 1, it could be base 2, it could be base 3, but you're like, no, it's actually more than all of these.
Legit, you can, and you know, as a manifestor, that's where I get angry.
But also,
I'm willing to look and listen to all perspectives and put them into place and see where your note sits in it. But it's very hard. People want to change your mind. They want to change you.
Well, this is where following type really works, and it's interesting because at some points in the base materials, Ra talks about base 5 type as being girl next door type and this type and that type and so on. At other points, he actually says this is, though, where we see a direct relation up to the human design concept of type, which is that when you're living out your type, regardless if it's one of these archetypal tropes, like from TV tropes, or whether it's the actual technical meaning of type, the manifestor, the generator, and so on, either way, it is through living out your type that you get to the freedom, that there's freedom in living out that type. So the surrender, not to going along with them, but the surrender to, well, I'm a manifestor. I'm here that if something's not working, I'm here to get on the phone and change it. I'm here to, you know, I loved what, you know, Alok said about how he was told he was a non-doer because they had the wrong birth time, but he just got to a point where he needed money. So he got on the phone, made a bunch of stuff happen, just made it happen. Anytime I tried to do that, it's blowing up in my face, right? He did it, worked perfectly. And so that way when Ra told him, by the way, you're a doer, he said, I know. Because he was living out his type from that. Yeah, exactly. So, well, thank you for sharing all that. And I do think that it is kind of like this plight of base 5 does have resonances with the plight of line 5.
And I'm really interested in seeing like marks where, you know, like one of my nodes isn't a 1, but it's also a 4. You know what I mean? Like my design. Today's actually my design birthday.
Happy Design Day. Yeah.
And it's in a base 4. There's been a time in my life that 100% I thought to myself, why do we procreate if we're not going to have like evolution? We are evolving. Why are we not putting the best out at all times? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, right. And base 5, despite the fact, that it has base 4 as a design base, will also be able to access base 2 evolution as well as base 4 progress, as well as base.
But like the devil's advocate, like there's a lot of times, I could see like I could be a very serene person that wants nothing but everything to be nice. But then I'm also like, well, shit.
You also see the base 4 side of it.
I wasn't
right?
upset about your little blow up yesterday. I was like, about fucking time. Somebody needed to do it. You know what I mean? Somebody needed to say, hey, we need to get everybody to stop. And figure out, where am I throwing chaos into this?
It's a very base 2 thing of mine. I'm like, part of my thing is like, we need to stop the movement.
So
okay, these base 1 people need to stop moving, stop wriggling, sit still. And base 1 is like, yeah, I'm gonna sit still, maybe when I'm dead.
So I don't know. It just literally, it just felt like whatever when you just described base 5.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, that actually sort of just gave me more permission to just say, hey, maybe I just don't resonate the same as
well, and that you're here for something different and that
yeah.
you're here to commune and to communicate and have that. So well, I really appreciate that. That was really good. Any other final questions, comments? Maybe we could do a break and we can pick back up.
Yeah.
All right, that was really enjoyable.
Recording stop.